Thank you, Trika. I'm going to go first. So I'm Kim Franklin. I'm the Conservation Science Manager at the Desert Museum. I've been there almost 10 years now, and my background is really in entomology. But about 4 or 5 years now, I was handed the job of coordinating the regional Buffelgrass effort when an organization, a nonprofit known as the Southern Arizona Buffelgrass Coordination Center, dissolved. They had existed for 10 years and they decided to hand over the job to the Desert Museum, and it sort of fell on my lap. And so I've been very focused on Buffelgrass for the past 5 to 6 years. So I have a presentation that sort of gives a broad overview of the Buffelgrass effort in the Tucson Basin, what Buffelgrass is, how you identify it, etc. And then afterwards, Vianey is going to give you a more specific to Tumamoc presentation, because Tumamoc has been a centerpiece of our Buffelgrass efforts for the past 4 years or so. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you, and feel free to interrupt me with questions during the talk, because it's a pretty informal talk, lots of photos. And I'm going to try to share my screen. Pull up my presentation. Good? Yeah.
Looks great.
So this is a photo that you probably all know because it's by Paul Maroka, taken from the top of the hill. And it's just looking across the Tucson Basin at the Catalinas, which are Catalinas and the Rincons are really ground zero of the Buffelgrass invasion here in Southern Arizona. So this is Buffelgrass. I'd be really curious to know how many of you, and I would guess most of you, are very familiar with this grass. Okay. It has this purplish bottlebrush seed head, which you can just go outside almost anywhere and see it right now. And after a while, when the seeds mature and fall off, then it has the remaining part of the stem here. It's called the rachis, and it's super rough. It's kind of zigzaggy. And so that's one way to identify Buffelgrass when it doesn't have that bottlebrush seed head. So most people in my presentations always ask, where did Buffelgrass come from? Why is it here? So around the turn of last century, there was a severe drought. There was severe overgrazing. There was a lot of mining going on across Western North America. And so scientists went on this search for miracle grasses. And they went to Africa and they found amazing grasses that have evolved in the African savanna under drought, under fire, under heavy grazing pressure, and Buffelgrass is one of those grasses. So they brought it over here. At that time, it was called the Soil Conservation Service. It's now known as the Natural Resources Conservation Service, a branch of the USDA. And they started to plant it around Southern Arizona. And it was mainly planted first on mine tailings, and then also later for cattle forage. And for a long time, Buffelgrass sort of hung out in the environment. It didn't take off. And that's pretty typical of invasive species. They might kind of hang out for decades until either it builds up, the seed bank builds up enough, and the climate conditions, the weather conditions, have just become super favorable and it explodes. And so that sort of happened in the 90s, where we saw it just explode. And then in 2005, it was added. By that point, we realized it was going to be a huge problem, and it was added to the state noxious weed list. So it's a prohibited noxious weed. And whenever I talk about Buffelgrass, I just like to mention its really close cousin, fountain grass, which is used as an ornamental, same genus. It is a pretty grass, but it's equally invasive. So it is as prevalent as Buffelgrass north of us in Tonto National Forest. And what we're seeing right now is that Buffelgrass is really, fountain grass is really taking off here in places where Buffelgrass has been established for a long time. It tends to be found in washes, but it also will be found on these incredibly dry, incredibly steep slopes. So it's kind of an enigma there. Why do we care about these two invasive species more than the myriad invasive species in our region? It's because they have such a power to transform the landscape. So here's a photo from Saguaro National Park, the Rincon Mountain District. You can just see it's just wall to wall Buffelgrass. And so even in the absence of fire, Buffelgrass fuels fires, but in the absence of fire, this landscape is becoming a monotypic grassland, a Buffelgrass grassland. And those saguaros that you see, they can survive in that sea of Buffelgrass, but the next generation of saguaros has almost zero chance of coming up. Often it's really easy to identify it from a distance. So here's the same thing happening in Tucson Mountain District of Saguaro National Park. These excellent photos are by Frank Staub. Here's a close-up, same area. Fountain grass does the same thing here in our area. We see it in these washes. And so here's in the distance in Pima Canyon and the wash. If you get a little closer, the wash is just wall to wall fountain grass. That's my son over there in the corner helping to remove some of it. So it's that transformative power that they have on our landscape. Here's Buffelgrass in August 2017 in South Tucson. So it's also an urban problem. At that point, it was green. In another month, it will be tinder dry and a huge fire hazard for neighborhoods where these dense stands form. And of course, if you're walking Tumamoc Hill, I have a feeling you're all very familiar with Buffelgrass. Here's the west slope of Tumamoc Hill, a slope we haven't gotten to yet. So all the yellow stuff there, the tannish yellow stuff is Buffelgrass. And Buffelgrass fuels fire, and there have been a number of fires on Tumamoc Hill. So here's a fire from March 2016. You can see the firefighters have it under control at this point, but it just will burn through those stands of Buffelgrass till it gets to the edge. And because fire is not a native part of the Sonoran Desert ecosystem, most of our plants are not able to withstand moderate to severe intensity fire. And that's the type of fire that Buffelgrass fuels. It is an excellent fuel. In August of 2017, what did I have up there at the top? Whoops. I can't even see the year. 2019, I think it is. August 2019, we had our first well-documented Buffelgrass fire in the Catalinas. There have been many, but this was just to the east of Soldier Canyon, and it was called the Mercer Fire. It was small enough that many people probably didn't notice. It was only 25 acres, and it was on a day where there was lightning, but it was also extremely humid. It was drizzling, and it was amazing to see a fire burn through the desert under those conditions. And it just burned through the stand till it got to the edge, and then it burned itself out. This is on the left. There is a photo taken. The firefighters were up there during the day of what happens when a saguaro is surrounded by Buffelgrass. And then we've been up on, Desert Museum staff have been up on the fire scar, documenting the mortality of saguaros post-fire. So we want to look at the long-term mortality, because a lot of those saguaros will continue to stand for the next however many years, but ultimately they'll succumb to the effects of that fire. Here you can see how extensive it is. And we're always focused on the saguaros, but the Palo Verde trees suffer even more. They have a higher mortality as a result of Buffelgrass invasion and fire. In fact, the neighboring hill, Sentinel Peak, you might remember the fire that happened during the 4th of July there. And if right now is a great time to drive by Sentinel Peak on Mission Road or Star Pass, and you'll just look up and you can see clear as day that fire scar where it eliminated almost all the native vegetation. The only thing sticking up in that fire scar, it's 5 acres, are saguaros. And we're also monitoring the long-term mortality of those flowers in conjunction with Ben Wilder. And over time, you'll see these flowers die and you get this field of Buffelgrass. And a lot of these smaller fires are not well documented, but it's a slow conversion into a Buffelgrass grassland. So the grass moves into this ecosystem. We're seeing Joshua trees here because the same thing is happening in the Mojave Desert, where these non-native grasses move in, they fill in this empty ground. These are relatively new ecosystems, the Sonoran Desert ecosystem and the Mojave Desert. There's a lot of open niche space. There's a lot of bare ground. The grasses move in, they fill in that empty space, and then they generate this grass fire cycle, which slowly converts, or actually rapidly converts, a desert into a grassland. I just wanted to mention that it's not just Buffelgrass, but there's a number of grasses that are doing the same thing across the West. Buffelgrass and fountain grass are a little different in that they are perennial grasses. And in some sense, that's a problem in that they're on the landscape year round, where a lot of these grasses are annuals. So one of the grasses that did play a bigger role in the Bighorn fire was this annual grass right here, red brome. So we had 2 wet winters in a row, an explosion of red brome, and that helped fuel the fire in some locations. And really, when you think about the extent of some of these grasses across the West, we're in a pretty good position here in the Sonoran Desert. So cheatgrass covers millions of acres. Here in the Sonoran Desert, Buffelgrass covers tens of thousands of acres, maybe even a little less than that if you just consider southern Arizona. And then I came across this quote from an interview recently, because it seems to be relevant not just to the Buffelgrass effort, but to just how much change, and sometimes it feels like negative change, is going on in our world today with climate change. And it can certainly lead to a feeling of powerlessness, because there's a group of people known as the Sonoran Desert Weed Whackers who have been digging up Buffelgrass in the Tucson Mountains for the past 20 years. Here they are. And they just stick to it. They're determined to prevent the Tucson Mountains from becoming dominated by Buffelgrass. And they've succeeded. They take an area that looks like this and they rid it of Buffelgrass by going back again and again and again until the patch is gone. And they've worked all over the Tucson Mountains in the past 20 years. And they've really demonstrated that we can have success. We can prevent Buffelgrass from dominating the areas that we care about most. We've done a lot of work on Tumamoc Hill. And on Tumamoc Hill, the main method of control, actually the only method of control, is herbicide because of all the archaeology. So we're not allowed to use any manual removal techniques on Tumamoc Hill. And the only herbicide that we've used for Buffelgrass across the Tucson Basin is glyphosate, a glyphosate-based herbicide. So that is sold under the brand name Roundup, and it's sold under, there's 100 different companies right now where you can buy it. And so it's a broad spectrum herbicide, but it definitely has a stronger effect on grasses. It's for broad-leafed plants. That's where you use it. And as a conservation tool, Roundup is really, glyphosate herbicides are very effective. It's actually the herbicide the Nature Conservancy uses the most to save habitat. It's a really different issue than, say, engineering plants to be tolerant of glyphosate and then spraying entire regions of the country that are dominated by agriculture with glyphosate. So in this very targeted fashion, it is a really powerful conservation tool. And the guy in the photo, Doug Siegel, works for Pima County. He really deserves a shout out because he's there just volunteering his time spraying Buffelgrass here on Tumamoc Hill. And he's done so much for the Buffelgrass effort in the past 20 years. because the Buffelgrass has been, it's so extensive. It's been spreading faster than we can control it. Saguaro National Park went through the process of getting permission through an environmental assessment to spray Buffelgrass aerially with a glyphosate-based herbicide. So for the past 4 years, they've been using fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters to spray Buffelgrass in areas that are very remote. So it's very difficult to get people in there. And where the Buffelgrass has achieved greater than 50% cover, there's relatively few natives left. So that's another tool in the toolbox. Here you can see August 2014, this was really early on. That is a green stand of Buffelgrass that was sprayed later that day. And there it is. It has turned yellow after a spray from aerial spray. So we use all the tools in the toolbox, and we find that when we can use all the tools in combination, it's more effective than using any one of those tools. But we continue to look for new tools. No one's excited about using herbicide. And so actually some of the research we're doing right now at the Desert Museum is in collaboration with a team from Italy that's been working on developing a bioherbicide for many years now. At this point, we have isolated a phytotoxin, a plant toxin that is found inside a fungus that attacks Buffelgrass, a pathogenic fungus. And so we're looking into turning that into a bioherbicide. Right now, we're testing it on Buffelgrass and fountain grass and comparing it to its effects on native species. And thus far, it looks like it is a very specific toxin, and it only is affecting the Buffelgrass and the fountain grass. Another big challenge that we face is mapping Buffelgrass. Mapping invasive species, mapping vegetation can be pretty difficult. And so here you can see Buffelgrass. This is way back in 2007 in the Catalinas. There you can see some big patches of it, and there's some smaller patches. And how can we detect those patches reliably? Well, we've tried just about every method, all sorts of advanced remote sensing techniques using satellite imagery, LiDAR, et cetera. And most recently, we've turned to experts and the imagery that's available through Google Earth. And so we had Aaron Olson, who's been involved in the Buffelgrass effort for 15 years and knows the Catalinas like the back of his hand, map it using his own eyes and Google Earth imagery. So he drew all these polygons around Buffelgrass in the Front Range of the Catalinas. Here's the close-up of a section of the Front Range of the Catalinas showing the Buffelgrass. Over here to the right, this is Soldier Canyon, which is a solid stand of Buffelgrass. This is that fire that I mentioned, the Mercer Fire in 2019. And this was one of the first things that Pima County asked us for when the Bighorn Fire broke out, to know where these Buffelgrass stands were. Fortunately, because of the weather and because of the tremendous work of our firefighters, they prevented the fire from moving into these stands of Buffelgrass. It was a higher elevation fire. So they did not burn in the Bighorn Fire. Another thing that the Desert Museum is doing, and that's super important, is coordinating the Buffelgrass effort. And so when the Southern Arizona Buffelgrass Coordination Center, that nonprofit, dissolved, which was in 2016, shortly afterwards, we formed the Sonoran Desert Cooperative Weed Management Area, which brings together all these partners across this really jurisdictionally complex landscape that we live in. There's so much public land. And really, you all have to work together because, like all of our major environmental problems, Buffelgrass doesn't obey boundaries. And so 3 to 4 times a year, we bring all the partners together, we share resources, we share insights, we share our challenges. A large part of it is simply, I think, developing a sense of camaraderie and building morale. because it is a challenging effort. And so knowing that you're not alone, I think is helpful. And then fairly recently, 2 years ago, I started working with a team of social and natural scientists at the University of Arizona, and we got a coupled human natural systems grant from the National Science Foundation to look at the issue of invasive species and why we haven't been very successful at a regional to a national to a global scale. And what sort of collective governance arrangements we need to have in place to deal with the challenge of invasive species. And so that has been really rewarding working with that team. This is Liz Baldwin, who leads that effort. She's in the School of Government and Public Policy. One of the most exciting things that Liz has found so far, based on the survey of about 1,000 Tucsonans, is that across the political spectrum, people are aware of Buffelgrass, and they support doing something about Buffelgrass, including paying a small utility tax. And so that was pretty encouraging. And we're just getting really started with this grant. So public awareness really is key to our success. There's where there are success stories, it always involves a high level of public awareness and understanding. So we are always trying to get out there in the local news and the newspapers. And a couple of years ago, we launched the Save Our Saguaros campaign to really focus this effort on, focus attention on what we stand to lose. Our saguaros, which are charismatic species and important culturally for so many reasons. And I was curious about you as Tumamoc stewards, because Tumamoc probably is the place where Buffelgrass is most prominent. So you don't see Buffelgrass when you're walking up that road, the north side, unless you're looking off into the distance, into the east, then you can see these massive stands of Buffelgrass. And this is a sign that's at the first hairpin turn on Tumamoc. I'm sure that you are all familiar with it. Here it is here during that spring when we had that amazing Palo Verde bloom. It's a beautiful sign. And I was curious if you all receive questions about Buffelgrass when you're walking the hill. I'm not even sure if you're identified so the public would know to ask you questions.
And you can just either speak up or raise your hand. I'm keeping track of hands up. But one thing I can say, Kim, is that at one point, someone didn't read the sign and just looked at the pictures. And they saw this person climbing a saguaro, and all they could see was abuse of saguaros. They didn't read what was going on. And so we got all this flack on social media. Yeah.
So maybe there's too much text on that sign. Maybe we need to pare it down.
Well, it's typical. I mean, as a conservation communicator, it is typical that you've got to really cut to the chase on something. There probably is too much text on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From my
yeah
limited experience, we have the museum partners with Tumamoc Hill and Clark and Anna and Ben have been great. We hired contractors to work on Tumamoc Hill, and they work so hard because it's such rugged terrain, and they have to work in August when it's brutal. And oftentimes the public, when they're walking up Tumamoc Hill, is sort of disdainful towards them because they're using herbicide. But in the past 2 years, that seems to have shifted. And actually some people, one of the contractors said, people actually thanked us this year for what we were doing. And I thought, wow, we are getting through to some people, because in the years past, people have screamed, you're killing our babies, crazy stuff at the contractors while they're working or whatever. And so it's just anecdotal, but we had only positive interactions in the past 2 years.
Well, that's great. So no stewards have any encounters there that are here?
I recently was talking to a few guys on the top of the hill, and they asked me specifically about Buffelgrass, and they were like, "What's the deal with Buffelgrass?" So I got to go and tell them all about it. I've done Bufflegrass schools and stuff, so I was able to share my experience. I do have a hard time knowing where exactly on the hill it is, because when they're asking me, "Oh, where is it?" and then I'm like, "Oof." I'm not sure if I have a keen eye enough, because you mentioned that maybe you can't see it when you're on the road.
Nope, that's the worst place to see it. So
Okay.
Anywhere you go in the Tucson Basin on the north-facing slopes, that's where there's no Buffelgrass. And then there's more on the east, and then there's the most on the south and west-facing slopes because it likes warm slopes. So actually, the best place to see it is if you're driving by Tumamoc Hill or driving by Sentinel Peak. From a distance, it's clear as day. But you have a lot of, I walked up Tumamoc Hill maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you have beautiful native grasses growing right now. And some of them form pretty dense stands, and they're not Buffelgrass. So
yeah, and I'm always I'm cautious before I always have to get one and look at the base to see if it's got the squiggly line.
Yeah, we've been working on the areas around the buildings and, working from the edge into the densest parts of the infestation. And so there isn't much Buffelgrass around where people are walking at this point.
Yeah, that's good to know, because I was always like, maybe I don't know what it looks like, because I don't think I see any. But yeah, I have talked to people about it.
Yeah, I think, it's such a great opportunity to tell people about it. We would like to see, for land managers and for skeptics within the public, if we're able to reclaim Tumamoc, as sort of a demonstration that it can be done, that you can. The nice thing about it is that you remove the Buffelgrass and then the natives come back. It doesn't require reseeding or revegetating. So the seed bank is long-lived and eventually it will come back. And in a place as important as Tumamoc, we're willing to put in the effort. We have a 10-year plan to eliminate Buffelgrass. We've calculated the cost to do that on Tumamoc Hill. And we need to update the numbers right now because we're finding that the cost, we're just figuring out what the cost per acre in the steepest, densest Buffelgrass patches are, because it's a lot more work than in some other areas where we've worked on the hill so far.
Hey, Kim, I don't know if you saw, but Deborah has asked a question as well.
Yeah, if you could monitor, I can't see.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. How often do you need to go back over the same place to get it? Like, there's just a single application 1 year, do it, or do you need to have multiple visits over a period of years?
Yeah, so the seeds are viable for a period of 3 to 5 years. So you need to go back a minimum of 3 years. Ideally, we would go back twice within the same season. So we had such a great monsoon. So we would have sprayed early on in the monsoon when Buffelgrass first greened up, and then maybe right now at the very end when Buffelgrass is starting to dry up. So the herbicide only works, I should have mentioned that, when the plant is green and growing vigorously. So ideally twice in the season and for 3 to 5 years. So it's not, wouldn't it be great if it was a one-shot deal? But no.
Well, I'm not a Buffelgrass skeptic, but and I think that it can be eliminated from Tumamoc Hill, but I think it's pretty hard. And amazing strides were made like 10 or 15 years ago, and then it all came back because, you just need this total follow through, and you got to get on all sides, and you got to do A Mountain, at least parts of A Mountain. So I'm just interested in how far you think you've gotten, like what percent of the Tumamoc Buffelgrass has been at least a first year kill.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into it because I want Vianey to have, she'll talk about that.
Oh, okay.
It's going a little, it's going slower than we would like, but you should all, if you have a chance, try and get a look at the east slope of the hill within the next month or so, because you'll see right now there's the living Buffelgrass unsprayed is still green, and you'll see a dramatic difference between what we've killed and wasn't sprayed. And so it's a great time if you can get a look at it right now. But you are absolutely how I end this is that, we're not trying to eradicate Buffelgrass. Tumamoc is a special place. We want to protect Tumamoc. And we are working with the city and with the Arizona Native Plant Society on Sentinel Peak next door, because of course you can't do one without the other. And we're working with Yuma County and the Tucson Mountains. Buffelgrass, the most favorable habitat is in the Catalinas and the Rincons. And so it's a much bigger challenge there. And it feels like, things are sort of unraveling around the whole globe right now. And it's hard to predict what's going to happen with climate change. And last year was the driest summer on record. And we had some Buffelgrass mortality. This year, Buffelgrass went bonkers. And so.
Yeah, if it gets hotter and drier, Buffelgrass will take care of itself.
It will take care of itself. Yeah, like we go further west into Yuma, there's not much Buffelgrass. And, we have to think outside the box. We have to, grazing may be something we want to consider, just because it can reduce the fuel load. It's not going to eliminate the Buffelgrass, but it can prevent fire. There's so many decisions to be made. And so what are we going to do across the Tucson Basin? I think that's largely inspired the work with the social science team at the U of A, because our federal and state and local land management agencies, how they are funded and how they operate is not conducive to having any success with these issues, because funding, at the National Park Service, funding's not consistent year to year. They don't know how much funding they're getting from year to year. The funding often doesn't come to the end of the year. You have to spend it at a certain amount of time, within a certain amount of time. So long-term planning becomes really difficult. And not to mention that they're just extremely underfunded. And so, I am open to anyone's thoughts on, the long-term vision for how we live with Buffelgrass in our region. We may go through this period of human history where we have a lot of Buffelgrass in our landscape, but I think that 99% of people would agree that a Buffelgrass dominated landscape is not going to provide us with the joy that we feel when we hike through the Tucson Mountains or the Catalinas, and that we see such this rich diversity. And so we want to preserve some places so we can experience that diversity.
Well, the Tucson Mountains and Saguaro National Park is, to my view, a huge success story. Of course, that's the driest part of Tucson. And Tumamoc is a big challenge, but I think it can be done.
Yeah, we struggle constantly with funding, but it can be done. Certainly it can be done. And Tucson Mountain Park on the Tucson Mountain District of Saguaro National Park is drier. The Rincon District, they have about 2,000 acres in Saguaro National Park. And they probably have more than that in the Catalinas. The Forest Service has the most acres and the least funding. A lot of this thinking has been done with Julio Betancourt over the years. Thinking about what's the future going to look like? Who is going to be responsible for managing problems like invasive species? And he thinks, there's going to be more local control of our public lands in the future. He's also advised me, Catalinas it's a tough problem there. And he said, focus on the areas where you can have success, smaller chunks that you can bite off and be consistent and actually win the effort there. So Tumamoc is one of those.
Kim, can I fit a question in right now? Mm-hmm. This came up in the chat, and the question is, does Roundup actually get into our groundwater? Roundup being the glyphosate. And then the second part of that question is, do native plants grow back after an area has been treated with that?
Yeah, so glyphosate actually degrades very quickly. So it doesn't get into our groundwater. The contractors spray individual Buffelgrass plants, and you can spray a Buffelgrass plant that's right next to an ocotillo or whatever other native plant, and it doesn't, no harm to the native plant. In fact, we worked with a scientist at the U of A, Elise Bornish, to look at how glyphosate affects the soil microbial community in the desert. And what it turns out affects the soil microbial community is Buffelgrass. But when you remove the Buffelgrass by using glyphosate, then after a couple of years, the soil microbial community returns back to what it looked like before the Buffelgrass was present. So glyphosate is, of all the herbicides out there, glyphosate has really this like amazing reputation that, and I think it's because it's so widely used, not necessarily because it's more toxic than any other herbicide that's out there. In fact, a lot of the other herbicides that you might use in place of glyphosate are more toxic. So it is, you know, at the forefront of everyone's mind. It's such a big controversial issue, but it is a powerful conservation tool. And so.
Well, and the first part of that question was, does it get into the groundwater?
It degrades too quickly. So no,
degrades too quickly to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, there are others that don't degrade in the soil. And so with enough time, they could leach into the groundwater. But glyphosate degrades very quickly.
Great, thanks.
Let me see here. Oh, I just wanted to just mention this species before I end. It's called stinknet globe chamomile, and it's already overcome hundreds, if not thousands, of acres in Maricopa County to the north of us. And it's flammable. It forms these dense monocultures like this. That's all stinknet, the globe chamomile. And it burns when it does. It has this acrid smoke. A lot of people are allergic to it. And we're going to be on the, because it's right next door in Maricopa, we're on the lookout for it. It'll come this winter if we get any rain. And so if you do see it, please let someone know. You can let someone, if you don't remember that the Arizona Native Plant Society is working on it, just let someone at the Desert Museum know. And we're trying to make sure it doesn't become the next big invasive species. And with that, I think I just like to thank you for your time and hand it over to Vianey. Vianey is, we've been so lucky to have her. She just started before this incredibly active Buffelgrass treatment season. So she moved from Yuma, came here, and then we just had her out on Tumamoc Hill and all sorts of places this summer with the Buffelgrass explosion. So I'll let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about specifically what we've been doing on Tumamoc Hill.
Thank you, Kim. And yeah, I think they took advantage because I'm from Yuma, and I'm used to the heat, so they had me out there working at the hottest part of the year, treating Buffelgrass. But so yeah, I'm the invasive species program coordinator with the Sonoran Desert Museum, and so like Kim said, really my role is a lot of it is just I'm doing outreach to the community about invasive species, as well as working with other partners. And prior to the working here at the Sonoran Desert Museum, I worked in Yuma doing a lot of restoration work along the Colorado River. I worked at this project called the Yuma East Wetlands, if anybody's familiar with that, if you are familiar with Yuma, but we did a lot of restoration there. Also removing invasive species, a little different because it's on the riparian corridor. So we did remove a lot of Phragmites or arundo and salt cedar, and then just restore it back to its natural habitat. But yeah, so let me share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let me put it on.
Perfect.
All right. Perfect. Okay, so I wanted to start off. So like Kim said, I'll be talking a little bit more about the actual control that has been done on Tumamoc Hill. I think she did a really good job on explaining what was done, or what Buffelgrass is. So I'm not going to get into those specific details. But one of the things I always like to show on pictures is and I think this picture, Kim had it on her screen as well with Doug, but it's just a good picture of how we treat that Buffelgrass with that chemical. So you could kind of see it's a sprayer, a spot sprayer. So it's very controlled. So you're not, spraying all the all the native grasses either. Same thing with here on the picture on the left. We use a lot of the backpack sprayers as well, which is also very controlled. And so something I also wanted to add was that, like Kim said, we work in collaboration with the Desert Laboratory at Tumamoc Hill, and part of our collaboration, maybe you think, what does the Sonoran Desert Museum have to do with Tumamoc Hill? But we work in partnership with them and try to, like she said, I think Kim mentioned it, we have some contractors, we hire contractors and try to deal with this Buffelgrass issue and trying to preserve this, natural landscape. And so part of my position is to actually go out there with the contractors and do quality control to make sure that they actually spray Buffelgrass and other invasives. Because and I'll talk a little bit more of it as I go through the presentation. But one of the issues or challenges we have here in the area is there's not many contractors who actually do this kind of work. And you'll see as we go through why. Like Kim said, they're out there in the summer when it's really, really hot, and some of these areas are really rough terrain, and so not everybody is equipped to do that kind of work. We don't have many contractors to do that kind of work. And so that has been really a challenge that we have been facing these last few years. Let me see here. So there we go. Sorry. So one of the first things I wanted to start off with is kind of like just a little brief timeline of Buffelgrass and how it's evolved through Tumamoc Hill. So the first time that actually research began to notice this invasive species was around the 1980s, that it was actually recorded, but nothing was ever really done. And then it wasn't until 2003 when efforts really commenced to control this invasive species. And after that, in 2005 was the first, is when we have a good detailed map of what extent or where Buffelgrass is. I know somebody had a question about that. So this is a very rough map of in 2005. If you see this red boundary, so this is all the area that it took in and that was recorded in 2005 along Tumamoc Hill, which was around 140 acres. And so after that, after 2005, they continue there was between, like I said, 2003 and 2009, there was some control of Buffelgrass. And then after that, in 2009, they just completely stopped any Buffelgrass control. And it wasn't until 2016 that we actually initiated that control, trying to, Buffelgrass, which was actually when Ben Waller started working with the Desert Laboratory. So we thank Ben for his efforts on trying to eradicate some of this Buffelgrass. And so in 2017 is when we kind of started collaborating with the Desert Laboratory, the Sonoran Desert Museum, and that's when we decided to again do another just mapping of the area to see how much it had. How much of the Buffelgrass had overtaken after, between that period that there was no control efforts between 2009 and 2016. So then the yellow polygon shows the area where we recorded Buffelgrass in 2017. And so it's roughly around 192 acres that was recorded. And typically we tend to just say 200 acres or 200 acres of infestation approximate, just because, sometimes there's some error and since it has been a few years since we've done any mapping, we're, especially after this really really great monsoon, we're sure for sure there's a little bit more Buffelgrass out there than was mapped in 2017. And so we, and in 2021 we continue our efforts. So the presentation, I'll be going through kind of that timeline from 2017 to 2021. And so in 2017 was like when we actually started doing some treatment along with Buffelgrass, or started the control using the chemical. And in 2017, this area here in green, the polygon, these two areas, which is the northern facing slope, is where we started treating. And again, really what the whole purpose of it was, they wanted to treat around, this is the desert laboratory right in here. And we wanted to, treat around the laboratory to make sure, for safety purposes. And so the game plan moving forward was to continue to retreat these areas and then kind of move clockwise. So you'll kind of see that pattern as we move or progress through the years. But the first year we treated about 49 acres. And this was in collaboration with the Sonoran Desert Museum, Pima County, and the conservation crew that did this work here. And the other thing you'll notice is as we move throughout the years. So one of the things that the museum we tend to do, especially, and I think Kim kind of elaborated a little bit about this, is you want to retreat. Because it's not a one-time deal and, you'll eradicate Buffelgrass. And so when you'll see in 2018, where we went back and treated those areas, that we first treated in 2017. But then as we retreated, we also kind of progressed through the landscape on that clockwise pattern. And so they also treated this area here and also the top of the hill, which is, I know, of higher importance as well, given, the significant cultural aspects that are in that area. And so in that year, we treated about 84 acres. Okay, and this, and here on the legend on some of these maps, you'll the names listed there at the bottom are the contractors that we actually hired to do some of the work. Like ASDM is the Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum. Pima County also helped, which is they did this spot here. Recon is a contractor that we actually used this year, and I'll talk a little bit about them in the next few slides. And again, if anybody has any questions, I guess I should have said that at the beginning. You can feel free to stop me or raise your hand. And I can't really see the screen, so if somebody can monitor if there is, or let me know.
You betcha. I'm keeping track here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's moving on to 2019. So again, you'll kind of, like I said, you'll see that pattern. We're retreating some of these areas that we treated prior, and then moving into the landscape and treating some of these new areas, especially here on right below the top. This is the top of the hill, so on the west slope. But yeah, we treated about 79 acres. And so what's really interesting is as we progressed, you'll notice that we are treating more and more acreage, which is really, it sounds great. But one of the things that we realize is after, you do several treatments, the density, it tends to lower. So you don't need as much, you don't spend as much time, and you don't need as much herbicide. So like if by 2020, when we were treating these areas here, we've already treated them, how many times? Let's see, sorry, 2-3 times. So we were able in 2020 to treat 102 acres versus, when we first started, we were only treating 49 acres. But one of the challenges with that was, as we, like I said before, as we were trying to find contractors to do some of this work, there's not many local contractors who can actually do this type of work. And so the contractor that we've been using, and like I said, you probably have seen it on the multiple mapping, is like Recon. So Recon is a contractor from San Diego. And so they have a really great crew, but the thing with that is because they are from San Diego, they tend to be a little bit more expensive, especially, because they have to come all the way from San Diego, and then that involves the mileage and per diem and all that. So they tend to be a little pricier. And so as we were retreating some of these areas, we were finding that, it wasn't really a very cost benefit to have them go back and treat these really less dense areas when we were spending so much. We were going to pay, X amount or a lump sum of money already. And so I'm going to show you here like that comparison just to give you a perspective. So this would be like an area. This is something that we were actually dealing with this year. This was a picture taken this year, looking just let me see. So looking downhill kind of towards like Centennial Peak on the east slope. And so, like I said, this area has never been treated. So you could just see how dense that this area is. And so this usually requires more time, more energy, more chemicals. So it tends to be a little bit more expensive. And as we progress through, this is kind of a difference where this area here on the left has been treating multiple times. I think either 2 or 3 times, probably one. No, sorry, this one has been treated once. And so you could kind of see the difference or the density. And then this one was treated 2 or 3 times. And so you'll see there's only a few here and there. But again, like we said, you still need to go back and retreat, or else if you leave these little seedlings after 2 to 3 years, then you're going back, to this landscape here. But so we kind of did change our strategy a little bit. Like I said, this year on 2021, since we were bringing this contractor from San Diego, we did decide to treat a little more like the denser areas. We treated this area here, which is the top of the hill, and right below right at the bottom of the slope, this whole area is new treatment. So we've actually never treated these areas. This area on the top of the hill has been treated multiple times, and actually, I don't know if you're allowed to go up on the top of the hill, but this is a really great area to kind of see that progression, and actually even the native species that are coming back. Just because we've treated it multiple times, there's a lot of natives that are coming back, and there's not really much Buffelgrass. So it's really just spot treatment. And we actually did start on this area right over here the first day that we treated, which was in July 26th. Just because there's just like a little patch of Buffelgrass that was starting to get out of control in this little area here. And Ben wanted us to go there. And also this was a good area to start because, like I said, typically I'm out there with the crews monitoring and making sure that they're treating Buffelgrass and not any other invasive species or not other native species. And so this was a good learning area for that crew, is to come in here and be able to like differentiate between what's native and Buffelgrass. So this was like a really good area for us to get started and learn the difference between Buffelgrass and natives. So this was our first day. So this year, like I said, we had a total of 13 days that we were treating out there. And we started on July 26th and went all the way until August 4th. From July 26th to August 4th, we actually had 8 people working out there those 10 days. And so they treated a lot of this area. They treated this area here, the top, and a portion, like kind of like right in the, like this section here is what this that group was able to accomplish. And then after that, they had to go take a rest because they actually worked 10 consecutive days, which was just, I think it was too much. They didn't really get a break in between. So they were exhausted by that 10th day. And then it was when it was really starting to get hot, we were reaching that 100, 101, 102 temperature. And then after that, we had another smaller crew of four crew members that came out here for 3 days to continue the treatment. And so this year in 2021, we were able to treat about 53 unique acres. And when I say unique, it's if you do the math and count all this acreage, we actually ended up treating about 64 acres total. but and the reason is because on the top of the hill, when they started treating this area, we were getting a lot of seedlings, and especially because we started in early, the 27th July. So we were getting a lot of Buffelgrass seedlings that were very similar to another native species, which is panic grass. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but they were very similar. So I wasn't comfortable, especially because I'm fairly new. So I was still learning some of the seedlings. Mature Buffelgrass is really somewhat easy to identify. But when you have the seedlings of these two different, grasses, we just weren't comfortable. So when the first day they treated this area here, they only treated the mature Buffelgrass and anything that actually had the seedling. That was easy to identify. And then after a few weeks, we came back. After that second week, we came back and retreated this area. Because at that point, a lot of the Buffelgrass had already matured enough or had the seedling where we could kind of compare, or same thing with the panic grass. The panic grass had the seed head. So we were able to identify. So that's the reason why it was really 64 acres total treated, but really it was just 53 unique acres, if that makes sense. So I'm going to show you here a little bit. Well, before I move on, so one of the challenges, and I'm sure that you all are familiar with the terrain at Tumamoc Hill, and if you haven't gone off the trail, it's pretty rough, and you have like these big, huge rocks here. I'll show you. So these, the whole landscape is basically covered in rocks, and so this is a picture of that 8-man crew that we had out there. And so you could only imagine having to carry a backpack that is, about 4 to 3 gallons, depending on the person. I think some of them did a 4-gallon if they felt comfortable, but a lot of them were just carrying 3 gallons just because it was a little too heavy for them. But just walking through that whole terrain with this heavy backpack and spraying. And so they really had a hard time, I think, especially, like I said, coming from San Diego. This crew, is usually are used to the cold weather. I mean, it doesn't really get that hot in San Diego, if you have ever been there. But here they were struggling a little bit with the heat, but also with the terrain. I know I was getting a lot of complaints of them saying like, oh yeah, I'm going back home and like my sole of my feet just hurt because like stepping on these rocks, then some of them are really pointy and they're rough. And so in carrying this backpack, so it was they had a really hard time out there. And that's, again, I think that's one of the challenges that we face is finding a contractor who is willing to do this type of work. Because it's, even if you're getting paid or you can make enough money, it's still having the crew who has the stamina and be able to actually, be out there. And especially, like I say, they were out there for like 10 days, 10 consecutive days. So they didn't really have a break. So I'm still amazed of how much they got done, even after that rough terrain and the heat. But I also wanted to show you a little bit of the system that they have, which is really cool because it saves a lot of time and it's really helpful. So like I said before, typically you would use these backpack sprayers. I don't know if you're all familiar, but like you said, it just, you carry the herbicide, you could refill it, and then you have that wand looking sprayer where you could spray the actual Buffelgrass. But with this system here, you actually have a tank where you could fill it up. I think this one was around 150 gallons. So they would fill up around 100 gallons a day or 50, depending on the day. And then you have this hose on the rig, like on the reel. And so you could actually extend the hose. And here you'll see them here walking up. So this is actually, they're on a mountain parking lot and they're walking uphill. And this was the 4-man crew that was only out there for 3 days. And so they were going uphill. And so what's really neat about it is that this hose could reach up to about 500 feet. And so as they're bringing this hose all the way uphill, you could actually use use it in two different ways. One of them is if you're in a really dense patch of Buffelgrass, you're able to actually spray it with a wand on the actual this hose. So the neat thing about that is that it's pressurized, and so what that means is that it actually expands the swath, or your spray swath, is a lot larger, and so you're able to treat more. And so that's kind of like that one picture that I showed you at the beginning with duck Siegel, where you could actually see how that swath, you could just see it, and it's a little wider, so you're able to treat more. But usually you just want to use this where there's a lot of Buffelgrass, like where it's really dense. Like if you only have one Buffelgrass, you're better off spraying with your backpack. But the other way that they also were using this hose was as they were up there, they once they were getting to these areas where that hose weren't, you couldn't really reach, they were using their backpack sprayers and coming back to the hose and refilling their backpack sprayers, which, that saves a lot of time, because you would have to think about it. If they didn't have that system, they would have to come all the way down, refill their backpack, and then go all the way up. And that saved a lot of time. And it's a pretty unique system, I think, and it's really it really worked out. It really works out there at Tumamoc Hill, because even the first 9 days that they were out there, and maybe if you were out at Tumamoc Hill, you might have seen them. They were actually on top of the hill. They were parked on top of the hill, and they had the hose coming down, and they were using that system that way. And so here I wanted to show you just a few pictures of what after the treatment and what that looks like. And so again, this is looking downslope on that east side of this, on the east slope. And this is a week after treatment. So you could start to see that yellow. And this is all Buffelgrass, all this yellow. And I know somebody else had a question about if it damages or if it actually causes any damage to the native vegetation. So one of the things with glyphosate, it's really a non-selective herbicide. So if you were to actually spray like the creosote or any of the other species, it could cause or could damage the native vegetation. But if you're very selective and you only spray the Buffelgrass, like you see here, all the other natives they're just harmless. They won't do anything. And like Kim said, as long as you're spraying the foliage when it's green, and you're not spraying anything else, it'll just kill Buffelgrass, and it won't move in the soil, which is really nice, because even if you do have some drift that ends up in the soil, it actually won't move, and so even it won't actually damage those non-targeted plants. So this is a really cool example of that. You just see everything that we wanted dead is dying. So the Buffelgrass. And same thing here. Here's another picture. This is looking upslope on that eastern slope. Same thing. This is 2 weeks after treatment. So you could start seeing even that Buffelgrass just dying off. And like Kim said, it's really good to go back and treat twice in a year, because sometimes you start getting some of the seedlings after some, if we do get another heavy rain event, you start getting some of those seedlings. And some of them are also that native grass. And so this is another example of what that looks like, and how, after, again, you'll see some of the, you have the ocotillo and all these other trees out here that just, they're they're looking good, they're green. So there's really no effect. And this is another picture I wanted to show you. Again, this one's looking downslope, but you could kind of see the difference, right? This is the area that they treated. I think it was like the second day that we were out there. And so this is 3 weeks after. And so you could see the area that wasn't treated, and it's green and lush, well, as the area right in the background is just dead. Same thing here. Here in the front, you have that dead Buffelgrass, and then you have that really green, lush Buffelgrass in the background.
Just a quick comment.
Oh yeah.
When earlier you showed pictures of the places that had been treated twice and 3 times and 4 times, and I was shocked at how poorly they were dying and how many were still there, because one plant with 1 million seeds, This year, you guys, this is incredible. Look at the kill rate is so much higher. And that relates a little bit to not killing other plants, because the Roundup kills actively growing tissues, and stuff was so green and so actively growing. It looks like you just hit it at the right time this year. And if you spray a little bit on a prickly pear, it's not as susceptible.
Right. And I think
Because
same
it's
thing.
not growing quickly. But this
Right.
is, I was so depressed when I saw those other pictures, and I'm so excited by looking at these pictures.
No, you should be excited. Like I said, we were very careful. The recon crew was very, very careful on treating just Buffelgrass. And that's where I think, with the support of the Sonora Desert Museum, us being out there and trying to show the contractor what's native, what isn't. Because again, a contractor coming from San Diego, they don't really have a Buffelgrass issue, so they didn't even know what Buffelgrass looked like. Some of them, a lot of them did, because they have done previous treatments with us. But it's really crucial to have good crews to actually.
And so associated with that, you have to hit it at just the right time. So did you?
Correct.
I have a feeling that you guys kind of missed it a little bit in some of the past years.
Last summer, there's this pressure to treat because you have the money, you have the grant money, and you have to spend it. And you don't know, you can't predict how much rain you're going to get in any given year. And so a window opens up, and you decide to let's go for it. Let's see if technically it's supposed to be at least 50% green. But of course, if it's 100% green and vigorous, the kill rate is going to be better.
Like this year.
Yeah.
Like this year.
Yeah.
But you can take it up. Ben makes that call. So you can take it up with him in terms of, is it green enough to treat? He's up there with Clark and monitoring the Buffelgrass. So
well, it's a big problem.
Well, and it's hard because you have to call the contractors and give them some advance notice, right?
Yeah.
So I have a question. Is the regrowth in subsequent years because it was an incomplete kill rate of adults, or is it just the seedlings coming up from the seed bank?
For the most, go ahead, Kim.
Well, what would you say, Vianey? I was going to say that mostly the seeds, but you don't get every plant. And
right.
So yes.
Yeah, so we, you try to get as all the plants, we want to be highly effective. 95% usually is where you want to be, 95 to 100. But sometimes it is difficult to get 100% of all those plants, especially in that rough terrain. But yeah, most of them are the seedlings. And especially, as you treat, like I mentioned, as we're moving, through the landscape, even if we treat, there's a lot in the soil that Kim said, 2 to 3 years that stay there. And so the thing with glyphosate, it doesn't really kill. It's not a pre-emergent, so it doesn't kill those seeds. So it'll just come back again, once it gets enough moisture or rain. And then also you have adjacent, Buffelgrass. Like on either an A mountain or even on that west slope on that we haven't really gotten to. So that also, disperses the Buffelgrass.
I just noticed with those first pictures, you said, like you got to spray 2 or 3 years, but those 4-year pictures, you weren't even close to getting all the seedlings out of there. So that was pretty depressing.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the challenge, right? And that's where we always say we won't eradicate Buffelgrass. We just can't here in our, it's Tucson Basin, but at least you could control it and maintenance. It really requires a lot of maintenance, unfortunately. And
another thing is the quality of the contractors varies. And so in past years, we've used local contractors that haven't done as thorough a job, I would say, as Recon has done for us. And so they miss plants. So that, it depends on how much oversight you can provide for the contract. If you can be on them at all times, then you can make sure that they're going to get every plant, but it's a challenge.
But the weed whackers do a really good job, but I guess they're able to pull, which is, and it's harder work, but it's,
but in some sense,
you pull it, it's dead.
You pull it out, it's dead, and you thatch it. We did, there are areas that were pulled recently, and like in the past 2 or 3 years, and this year they came up with seedlings. And so you go back to that area and you get all those, you can just pull those out by hand fairly quickly.
Yep.
So even then you do have that seedling issue, but the plants are all dead and they're very thorough, the weed whackers.
Yeah. They are. And then sometimes even a combination of both really works as well. Because I know, and I probably could show you on the next slide, but there's a volunteer, his name is David Walker. He does a lot of pools there. He has like this patch of Buffelgrass where he pools, and kind of in between like Sentinel Peak and where Tumamoc Hill area. And so he pools, but then during the summer when there are some seedlings, he goes back there and sprays. And so he's had pretty good success there as well.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's turning it into bricks. And he's working in your territory, someone that the Tumamoc stewards might want to connect with.
Or maybe have them come and do a presentation as well, because it's really interesting what like Kim said, he uses this for adobe. And so he's found a use for Buffelgrass, which is something we always want, we want to hear. If he needs to use it, keep pulling. Yeah.
He's making houses full of seeds that will come back in 100 years.
No, they're only
We had another question that came in on the messages here, and it was regarding the effect on any of the native wildlife, any animals, reptiles, insects, etc., that might be exposed or may eat treated plants. Is there any knowledge about that?
Kim,
I think she's asking, or the person is asking about the effects of the herbicide on, say, a deer or, and no, we don't think that there's any negative effect on the wildlife as far as we know. For one, Buffelgrass isn't consumed by almost any of our native species. It's the last grass that, deer will turn to. Tortoises don't eat it, things don't eat it. And so they're not going to eat it before or after it's sprayed with glyphosate. It degrades so quickly within a matter of days that I think, that's not a big issue. And if you don't get rid of the Buffelgrass, they've done some research to show that the condition of animals like the desert tortoise declines with the density of Buffelgrass, because it replaces their native foods. They're eating plants and they don't eat Buffelgrass. So
that would be great if you could share any of those papers. That's awesome. And I also, having been involved in the restoration of bighorn sheep on the in the Catalinas, I know we're like paying attention. So are they eating Buffelgrass? And there hasn't been a lot of evidence of that. So
I thought there was anecdotal evidence that bighorn sheep are one of the few animals that will eat Buffelgrass, but as far as I know, it's anecdotal.
Yeah, totally anecdotal. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, we figured if some animal that we're grazing on it, we probably would reduce the population at least slightly. At least I would hope. But yeah, just a funny thing that happened as we were up there. Recon did mention that one gentleman was a little upset about glyphosate, killing Buffelgrass. He's like, "Why are you killing why are you killing the deer's food?" So that's what. And then I told them, no, just let them know that deer, that's like the last thing that they'll eat. They'll eat it if that's the only thing out there, but they tend to go for the native grasses. So it was pretty funny. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, so here is a photo. It's a little blurry, but you could kind of see that treatment area. So this is looking from 8 Mountain across to Tumamoc Hill here on the east slope. So all this area here we go. So the polygon, this border shows what we treated this year, but you could kind of see the difference because this was treated the first. So all this area that looks dead, or all this brown is the Buffelgrass that we were able to treat and effectively kill. And this was the first 2 weeks. And then this area, the one that is turning yellow, was that second treatment, or the second crew that was out here for 3 days that were able to get all of this area here, which is starting to yellow. So like Kim said, if you're out there and you drive by, here's the A Mountain parking lot. And if you even walk by it, you'll be able to see that difference. I mean, it might be a little too late now. I haven't been out there, but because some of the actual Buffelgrass along A Mountain, Tumamoc Hill is starting to go dormant again. But this picture also just shows you how much there still is, especially in this area here. All of this green, lush mat is basically Buffelgrass that we weren't able to get. Unfortunately, our funding, we didn't have enough funding to treat the whole east slope. Because we actually received this funding it was a grant that the Sonoran Desert Museum received through the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. And so this little patch here was that what I mentioned, David Walker's little patch, and it's really hard to see, but it's kind of bare ground. So like I said, he usually goes there and pulls Buffelgrass, but then when it is in the summer, when or whenever we do get a good amount of rain and it starts to seed, he actually does treat this area as well. And once, maybe even next year or the following, you'll be able to see his patch. Usually it's pretty visible from the road. And so,
can I just something real quick here? Sorry. So I just wanted to point out that it's 6 minutes after 7. I just want to honor everybody's time here, including yours. And I mean, you've got a captivated audience here, but just wanted to point out the time that we usually wrap up around 7. So I really appreciate everybody that's sticking on, and it's certainly worth it. So that's all I wanted to say right now.
Okay. Well, this is my last slide. Sorry if we went on for too long.
Perfect.
Yeah. So this is the last slide. I just wanted to show you that the combined, from 2017 to 2021, what we've done thus far. And so, and this is kind of the road to give you that perspective. Here's the top of the hill, and here's the laboratory, desert laboratory. And so all this red is basically what we've done, and the areas that look darker, it's because it's the areas that we've actually treated multiple years, just because it's we did it through the GIS, so it's like multiple overlay layers. So these areas here, as you can see, are the areas that we've treated multiple years. And so this area was some of those pictures that I took where it was really dense, that we've never treated before, kind of near the A Mountain. And that's what we were able to accomplish. But again, we weren't able to get all of that Buffelgrass. But I mean, I think we're making some progression, and hopefully next year we're able to go back in there and retreat.
Yeah, we hope so.
Hope so. But yeah, so I think that was the end of my slide. Yeah. If anybody has any other questions.
Yeah, any questions or comments? That was so, I mean, I'm up there all the time. My office is up there. I did not even know all this. I know that Ben and Anna and Clark and everyone, we've got so many projects juggling that I certainly never knew the extent to which you all were doing all of this work. This was huge. I see a question here in the chat. It's a thank you.
No, thank all of you for, it's nice to be able to share it with you and this particular audience. So,
Kim, did you want to share that link to the Buffelgrass and mention that?
Yeah, I'll just put it in the chat. It's just bufflegrass.org. If you go to that, you'll see a slew of buttons, and one of those is volunteer for a pool. And so you can sign up for a pool in the Tucson Mountains or elsewhere where they're holding pools. Most of the pools are listed there. We can use all the help we can get. So, yeah.
And as Kim mentioned, we don't tend to do the hand pulling on Tumamoc Hill because of the sensitive nature.
So I know that Ben is very open to the idea of volunteers spraying on the hill. And so that's something we, with the controversy around glyphosate-based herbicides, generally it's not something that we have pushed, but I know Ben is open to that.
And also just the terrain as well. It's very sketchy. So you'd have to, be in pretty good shape and be able to, like you said, to carry that backpack through those rocks. It's like you said, they're very loose. So it's not easy. It's not easy work.
Well, any other questions or comments? I see several thank yous there in the chat box, and I'm sure we all agree this was just an awesome presentation, and we thank you both so much for. And this will be on, as I mentioned, this is being recorded and it'll be on our YouTube page. So I'll make sure to share it with you all. So, I mean, of course, all of you stewards, but Kim, you and Vianey as well, so that you can have access to it.
Thank you.
There's a beautiful moon out tonight.
Let's check it out now.
Yeah.
So when we close off, I encourage everybody to get out there and go look at the moon. Thank you all. Look for that email I'm about to send. Kim, Vianey, thank you. And thank all of you stewards. And we'll say good night.
Good night.
Thank you.